Welcome to the City Show, where we capture the voices that bring our world's cities to life. Today we have a fascinating guest, Chef Romain Avril, who is I guess I would qualify him as a celebrity chef. He's certainly a chef that has quite a following. Based in Toronto, originally from France, he's worked across the US and Canada for the last 15 years. He's not just a chef, but he has a catering, consulting, social media, PR business, and a teaching business, all combined within what he does, which is make obviously wonderful and delicious cuisine. He basically takes being a chef to the next level. Chef Romain, thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Jack. Thank you.
Thank you. So you've journeyed to incredible places for work. You've lived in the US, Canada, Australia, Indonesia. What sparked the idea of working in such different and exotic destinations? And how does being a chef differ from place to place?
Well, I think you have to look at it the other way around is how chef allows you to being able to travel from different places. There's very few jobs that can do that for you. And of course, you have to have a different mentality. You have to be open first and foremost. And as a French person, maybe that's not the first quality of a French person, so to say. We are known to be pretty close-minded. But to me, I think what sparked that multicultural interest was my degree that I had done in university, where I took Chinese gastronomy. So that was my first kind of leap of faith toward the world and how there's different cuisines. And that took my journey to the UK, where I worked for 4 years. So that was the first glimpse that I've had that is way more than what you know locally.
So you developed a specialty in Chinese gastronomy.
That was my first touch outside of the French gastronomy that I had learned for the past 7 years prior to that. So Chinese gastronomy and French gastronomy was the topic of my degree. We had done our essay on the place of flowers and plants in gastronomy. That would be back in 2007. So now they are super popular. Like, we work with so many different flowers, different plants added to the plate. But back then, it was very something that was just starting. And at the time, I was working at a 2-star in London, and they were molecular as well. So they were pretty much pioneer when it came to that sort of stuff.
You know, I got to make a confession. I stayed in China for about a month and a half, some years ago. And the thing that I love different types of cuisine. I'm very adventurous when it comes to cuisine, very easygoing when it comes to good food. But something about the food in China didn't sit right with me. And I'm a healthy guy. But when I was in China, I was eating McDonald's and Hooters every day, because I couldn't find cuisine that I liked. But the irony behind that is I actually love the Chinese cuisine that we have in North America, that you find in Europe, that you might find in Chinatown, which is absolutely delicious. Anything from, the typical American Kung Pao chicken, General Tao. Are these types of flavors tailored to an American audience, and why are they different than what is being served at restaurants in China? Why is there such a distinction between Chinese food in China and Chinese food in North America or in Europe?
Well, I think that goes for a lot of different cuisine. You could say the same thing about Thai cuisine, Japanese, Korean, Indian, Sri Lankan. A lot of these cuisines have been re-tailored to a more acquired taste that people that are living in Europe or North America. A lot of the dishes that we actually consume as Chinese food aren't even being made in China. Also, China has so many regions. So if you're in the north of China and then you're in the south, you're going to have like completely different use of ingredients, types of dishes. So you could love a cuisine from a region. For example, the Cantonese cuisine is completely different than like another region of China. So I think that's the first thing. And now we have that in common with France or Italy, for example, where the cuisine is so regional. And they really cook with what grows around them within the terroir, within themselves. So if you are in the west of France and you are in the east of France, you're going to have like complete different food because you're near the ocean or you're near the mountains. So very similar there. Now, I also think it's our palate. It takes a very, very long time to come. As for myself, I live in Toronto, the most multicultural city in the world. So I'm exposed to millions of different cuisine. but I'm not going to go downtown where it's the more, I would say, what I would call like white version of those cuisines. Actually go in the suburbs where it's actually more traditional and the restaurant is being visited by local to those regions, because that's where you actually have a true version of the food, and that's how you can actually start to accept those new flavors for your palate to develop and being more appreciative of the flavors and the dishes they're cooking.
You know, Chef Romain, that's actually brilliant because I think a lot of people don't necessarily have that sense of adventure that you have, that sense of curiosity that you have, to actually wonder what is the authentic way to have that type of cuisine. And of course, you must have traveled a lot for work and you must have seen what it means to actually taste the authentic version of international different and having an appreciation for what is unique, to that cuisine from that region and what is authentic to that cuisine.
I think
It's very interesting.
two words you've said, I mean, like, is adventurous and appreciation. I think those are like key words you've just mentioned. And just like a quick story, when I was in Indonesia, of course, I was there for work. So I had what we call like a handler who would be from the region and tell me like where to go, where not to go, where to eat, what not to eat. And one of the first thing they told me is just like, do not ever eat at a street market or at a night market. And my answer was right, because where you'll get sick. And my first answer was just like, I haven't traveled like 26 hours on a plane to go in a hotel and eat, like a burger that is very acquired to maybe what North American or European taste is. No, I'm here because I want to experience. And the only way I can say I've tried Indonesian cuisine is to literally go on the street and have what the local eat. And I did not get sick. I think, there's also like a big scare. And don't get me wrong, I could have, because the hygiene was definitely not up to our standards. Their stomach is definitely stronger than ours, but the reality is maybe that's kind of sad, because like, why is our stomach so weak in a sense? Like, are we actually not going away from trying more things, being more adventurous, and like putting our body to be stronger? Because I think we get sick all the time. We have like a little flu and then we're in bed for a week. I mean, like, food is such a healing ingredient. We try to take pills, we take supplements, but like most of these things are found in food. And I think if we had a better diet, we took more care about like what we're eating, what we put into our body, we would be a stronger human being. And maybe instead of criticizing the poor hygiene of India or Indonesia or Africa for some countries that are maybe underdeveloped, maybe we should actually look at it as maybe the medicine to our own body, and not require tablets and white pills, but rather just eat better and make ourselves stronger through food.
That's actually a very unique perspective that you just shared with our audience. The idea that, maybe we got to level up if we can't handle the food when we travel places like India and Indonesia and so on, instead of wondering what they could do differently about their hygiene. So that's an interesting perspective, and I think one that has a respectable angle that you can argue. Now, I think here's a very interesting topic that I think you can appreciate. You're from France, one of the most beautiful countries in the world, certainly the most visited country in the world, that comes ahead actually of America. I think pre-COVID, the visitor numbers to the United States was something on the rounds of 50 million foreign visitors annually to the United States, and annual visitors to France was 60 million, in spite of the fact that the population of France is a fraction of the population of the United States. How do you compare working in France versus working in the US and Canada? I'd like to get your feedback on that.
It's as simple as like two worlds apart. I think it's a complete different culture. And to be fair, you working with a European country that has hundreds of years of experience versus North America, that are a newer country, so to say. So they've also got inspired by other countries, other ways of doing things. They were in modernity, versus Europe that has, like ancient building and lots of architecture and history. North America is building itself. They try to find an identity when Europe already has one. So if you're born in France like myself, you go strong into the cooking department with hundreds of years, many legend chefs, a love for food. When you go into North America, food is new. Food is not appreciated the same way as it is in Europe. So it's just very different approach, and you should never look at it the same way, or chances are you're going to like go straight into the wall.
Of course. You have to appreciate the differences. One
You
being
do.
obviously an older culture,
Mm-hmm.
in the case of France, and the US and Canada being newer cultures and bringing something different to the world,
Yeah.
each bringing something different to the world. What do you love about France, and what do you hate about France?
Yeah.
And perhaps by that token, we can talk about, French culture and
Mm-hmm.
ways of being and perspectives and so on.
Well, that's a question that I get very often is like, what are you doing here in North America while being French? Being born there, living there, having your family there. It's a beautiful country. You have the wine, you have the cheese, you have the food, you have the culture, you have the museum, and so on and so forth. That is all true, and I love everything about that. I mean, I'm a very proud French person. I mean, now I do have dual citizenship, but at the end of the day, my blood is blue, white, and red. So I will always be French. I would always represent France as who I am, as my core identity. Although it has evolved. I'm not the same French person that I was before I left. One thing I don't like about France is it's tricky. I wouldn't say I don't like it. I think it's just very personal. I will not say that like what goes for me goes for everyone, but for me who loves working, who loves trying, who loves being adventurous, I feel like France is not the best country to go into those topics. Like, we do have lots of rules. French are known to be a bit of a complainer. They like their life balance, which is fantastic. I mean, you do want that, but I also feel like as an entrepreneur, it's harder. And I feel like with North America, my age didn't matter. I showed up here at 25, and they're like, I don't care about your education. I don't care about your accolades. Like, are you good or are you not? Can you do this or you can't? And it allows you to work more. It allows you to be more successful, I feel. When in France, we also have this bad habit of being very jealous, being very envious. While I think in North America, we tend to promote one another and to push one another. Of course, there's always going to be envious and jealousy. But for example, in France, you don't talk about money. You don't talk about because you don't want people to start give you the bad spirits on you, because they're gonna be like, oh, this guy lives well. And it's almost like similar to, if I take it to I love football, so soccer. And if you look at a player like Kylian Mbappe, who's one of the top players in the world, the second he does well, then people start to hate on him because he makes too much money, because he's too successful, because he has the last car, the last pair of glasses, the last everything and everything. And that's one thing I don't appreciate about that. The last thing I will say that I'm not a fan of is just the lack of adventure. We are very proud. We're a very proud country, but that goes for other near us, like Italy, for example, because we've always been told that we have the best of things, which is not untrue, but that doesn't mean that you should not be looking at your neighbor. Oh, we make the best croissant. Oh, we make the best food. But meanwhile, there's an entire world who's watched us, who's come to our country, who's learned our ways, got back to theirs and perfected and got better and surpassed us. For the longest time, we had the most Michelin. That's no current, and that's not very true. You go to Asia, and you're gonna have incredible restaurant that can do so much more. You go to Alinea in the States, in Chicago, and then you're gonna have incredible meal, like so thoughtful, with like many different things on the table that you can't even imagine. Anyway, there's like a huge love for the art, and in France, we just kind of like sit tight and we're like, oh, we are the best, we are the best, we are the best. But by saying that, what you don't realize is you no longer are, because people have gone better, have improved. And I'm very much a person that's like, it's not about being the best. I don't want to be better than you. I don't want to be better than this next guy. But like, I want to better myself every day. I want to be a better version of who I was yesterday. And the only way to do so is to accept that I'm only so good and I only know so much. And I want to learn more and I want to improve. And that's maybe a quality that we don't really have back home. That being said, I still love my country, but that's the things I would work on for sure.
So I have a huge appreciation for French culture, but I think you raise a very good point that sitting on your laurels, or having certain cultures have that element of sitting on your laurels, which means getting used to the former grandeur of your history. the former glory of what your country is or means or what what it has accomplished, is a way not to succeed in the future and
Exactly.
not to bring about new achievements.
Hmm.
And I think that's one of the amazing things about American culture or about the American way of life, is that there's always this idea that you have to keep working, keep innovating, keep creating. And I think that's why a lot of people have faith in the potential for America to rebirth. They keep talking about the death of the American empire. But the American people are tremendously, have a tremendous capacity for reinvention and for, coming out of tough times and kind of reinventing themselves. So I think certainly America deserves a lot of credibility for that, a lot of credit for that. What do you think Americans and Canadians can learn from the French, and what do you think the French can learn from Americans and Canadians?
I would definitely, and that always sounds harsh, but I think education and culture, I think it's something that is maybe bypassed. And it's not necessarily because the people of North America don't want to. It's maybe like the education system as a whole that needs to be revisited. Same thing with health and kind of like the more deeper subject. But I think to me, like, this is kind of like what maybe will stop you from progressing and the appreciation of other things of other countries. That's always something that I found, like, especially for me who's like in love with history, geography, other culture. I think it just allowed me to better myself as well because I'm open to learn every day. On the other end, what can, French people learn from the American, I think is from North America, I think is what you said. I think it's that, like, the possibilities. We've always, like, say, the American dream. Is it still accurate? Maybe not the way we talked about it like 30 years ago, 40 years ago, but I truly believe that, like, France and French people should allow themselves to be creative or to be innovative. And a lot of the French people that are successful are one that have left the country and have moved to North America, where they can actually make money from their dream, from the innovation, from thinking outside of the box. So I think those two are probably like two things that if you switch them, both countries will better themselves in many ways.
It's funny, walking the streets of New York, you hear French all over the place. The French have invaded New York, and they have this tremendous fascination, I think, with the idea of living in New York. And I feel like the tables have turned, because once upon a time, back in the 1920s, there was this idea of this glorious generation of Americans that had moved to Paris in search of a more elevated life, so to speak. That doesn't really happen anymore. You have some Americans that live in France, but the experience of being a French being an American, but the experience of being an American living in France is very different.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have the same opportunities. I knew this fellow who became one of the third most successful. I'll give you an example. So I know this fellow who became, a C-suite officer of one of the biggest pharmaceutical companies in the world, American pharmaceutical company, one that we've all heard of, and we've probably all taken pills from that company. He didn't speak a word of English until he was 40 years old. He started learning English at the age of 40. French fellow. At 57, he was a C-suite officer, third most powerful person in one of the most powerful pharmaceutical companies on the planet. Now you tell me if you could find an American that would become a C-suite officer of a top French company. It would never happen in a million years.
Yeah.
The French don't have that openness of culture and that openness of acceptance of other people to integrate them within their societal work and even social infrastructure. So that's certainly one of the things that I don't appreciate about the French and about France.
Yeah, it is definitely very close and protective, and you can see it in, like, every layer of society, from sports to industries. And it's sad because maybe we look at it as like protecting ourselves from having other people like take our stuff, but I see it more so as like, hey, if that person can come in and develop our country and make it better in XYZ department, we should allow them to. And it's not like saying like, oh, like take everything over, but more so like, hey, if it's going to make us better and being able to, because at the end of the day, if a company does well, a French company does well internationally, it only benefits every people from the country. But we're looking at it as like, no, it has to be French, otherwise, like we don't want to support it. But if it benefits like Mr. Paul and Mr. Jacques, then they should be a little bit more open rather than being like, oh well, we need a French person to do so. Well, here in America, it's like, oh, how many people in the medical field are French and have done the study in French? So hundreds of thousands. Because the American, they would look at it, it was just like, oh, we don't have that skill set. Well, this person from XYZ country does. So let's bring them here and make our country better. And I think that should be kind of like a view on, like an international view for every country. We should always want to be better and better ourselves for our people.
I couldn't agree more. Romain, have you ever done live television events? Maybe you want to talk about your experience with the 50 TV appearances that have earned you a unique kind of fame.
Yeah, I think my first TV was, I should say 11 years ago now because it's 2025, but it was back in 2014. I was working at a restaurant. It was like a breakfast television, and I had never done TV before. And I was quite excited, actually. Funny enough, how you stress about so many things in life, but for some reason I was not stressed at all. And then the red light came on, and I felt like a completely different person. I was very comfortable, and I realized that hey, that's something else I could do. I had done theater as a teenager, and it really helped me with coming out of my shell. I was a very shy kid growing up, so TV is part of my life, and it kind of like shows you as well that whether you're a chef or you're in something else, that you're not destined to one direction. I think you have to open yourself to many ways, many areas that you can develop within your core job. But yeah, TV, I think, I don't even know how many I've done, but it's now almost like work. And that's the best part, when it's not becoming something you just like, oh, it's an exception. It's just like, oh, I'm going to go on TV, but it's not special, which is fun because that means like you've made it to a point where it's part of who you are, and you're able to express yourself. And I always love showing people new tricks, new tips, whether it's on social media, but also on live TV. What better ways to tell somebody something they don't know and make their life better through sharing knowledge? And I feel like having a voice, whether it's on your podcast, on the radio, I have done multiple radios as well, or on TV, you're not there to talk about yourself. You're not there to be like, I'm amazing, like, look at me, like, hear me, like, every word that I'm saying, you should take as I'm blessing you with saying no. The way I look at it is just like, hey, here's what I've known, here's what I've learned, here's what that other person taught me. Now it's my turn to gift you with the knowledge I was gifted. And this is how we all become better as well. And this is how I see media altogether. To me, that should not be, of course, if you get paid, fantastic. You know what I mean? Like, we always want to do better and make money. But also, you should really see those opportunity as always carrying and conveying a message, whether it's a message of knowledge, whether it's a message of peace, whether it's a message of making somebody feel better by themselves. But I think it should always have like a positive impact on people versus going in and kind of like rolling the shoulder and be like, look at me, I'm beautiful. This is not really how I see media. To me, it's more so a way to use your voice to do better.
Sounds like TV has given you a lot of blessings, and you have a unique perspective that it's not just a performance for you or
Yeah.
An opportunity to gain exposure, but it's an opportunity to impart your knowledge and share what you've learned.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a beautiful way to look at it. What's your favorite kind of cuisine to make?
It's such a hard question. I will, like a few years back, I would tell you that like my style really is French Asian, a very modern approach to it. When I got my personal trainer, he told me like, oh, you're gonna have to stop like, eating butter, cream, and like all this heavy French stuff. And I was just like, oh, this is not how I cook at all. Like I'm more into vinegars and oils and like kind of like a different approach from French cuisine. I really found that like Asian cuisines and French cuisine are almost made to be married and be together. I love the French techniques, but they can be like the French flavor can be a pretty monotone. If you think about it, I always use that same example where French cuisine is really good, but it's a little bit like a flat line. Like you kind of like surf on the same like very calm ocean. But the second you're adding flavors from Asia or elsewhere in the world, then your life starts to like kind of like bounce up and down. You have like heat, you have acidity, you have like a kick, you have a herbaceous flavor, you have ginger, you have chilies, you know what I mean? You have miso, you have all these beautiful flavor, and now the oceans start to be have little waves on it, start to like rock your boat and make it like move faster because the wind is spreading. And that's kind of like how I see food. Every culture has amazing food, but we should never be afraid of marrying them, trying things. So I think my favorite food is the food from the world. It's just, I don't want to pinpoint one in particular, although yes, French and Asian definitely are my favorites. But I think what makes me happy is more so mixing them. At Christmas, I cooked with my family, and the meal was going to be very, very French. But then I added, so my uncle had made fish, and it was like Dover sole and scallops. Very French. He had made like a French sauce. But then I came in with like parsnip puree, but added vanilla into it, added like a pear cider into it. Then my veg were bok choy that I sauteed with ginger, garlic, a little bit of spice as well. And now the dish takes a completely different direction and it's balanced. It's delicious, but it's also a way again to heal because you digest faster because you've added ingredients that's gonna make you be and feel better. That's a long answer for like I mean it's a long rant for a short answer, but I think mixing food, mixing cultures is my favorite food.
You sound like a big proponent of fusion cuisine.
Yeah, and I think fusion was so bastardized for so long. I think when people thought of fusion was just like, hey, take a dish, take another, and put them together. But this is a little bit more complex than that. It's more so on a deeper level, like on a molecular level, where you look at what goes together and then you fuse that versus being like, here, here's spaghetti and I don't know, like Jollibee, for example, and then you kind of like mix it together. This is not the fusion I'm thinking about, where you take two things from two culture, but more so like really go in the deeper roots and elevate each other's cuisines.
So I've never eaten there, but there's this restaurant in New York in Tribeca that I used to walk past. It was called Japanese tacos and Mexican sushi. So that was a brilliant twist on, of course, tacos and sushi, combining, the best flavors of both Mexican and Japanese culture in each tacos and sushi. That's an interesting way to, combine two well-known cuisines from
Yeah.
each.
I mean, you do have like the Nikkei cuisine, right? Which is the mix of Peruvian and Japanese cuisines. Very, very popular in Peru. And for having tried it multiple dishes, I can tell you it works on so many levels. So don't get me wrong, some things are atrocious and should not be done, but unless you try, you're not going to find out. And that goes back into being adventurous. And you should not be afraid of trying, but also you should not be afraid of making a mistake and failing. This is how we're gonna learn. If we don't try and we don't fail, we're not gonna learn from our mistakes. So making food is very similar in that sense.
What's next on your chef's bucket list?
More travel, more eating, more discovering. That will always be kind of a constant evolving in the way I'm eating as well. Veganism, for example, plant-based diet. I wrote a cookbook and it's a fully plant-based cookbook. Not because I will see myself more as a flexitarian, but just so because I think we have to appreciate the plant-based diet and change the vision that we have on it. And incorporate it on our daily life. I mean, I eat meat. I had meat last night, but doesn't mean that today I will. So it's kind of like thinking of like the sustainability aspects of our lives. We are more and more and more on Earth. We have to try to protect for next generation. So we have to be pioneer once again of like how we can go ahead of the problem. And I think mixing a diet is one way to do so. Other than that, I mean, like I'm always about new experiences. I'm always about like meeting new people, new adventure. Owning a restaurant. Sadly, COVID took that dream away from me. I owned a restaurant for 3 days, and then the first lockdown happened. So one day a restaurant, but I'm not in a hurry. I think we should not be forcing things when it comes to a career. I think it's very important to have goals, but you should also kind of like let things happen. You should always try to do everything in your power to reach for them. But if it's not meant to be, it's not meant to be, but doesn't mean it's not going to be. So I think it's just like always work hard, keep the same ethic. And as for me, it's going to be another year of that. Trying, like this is the beautiful thing about consulting. It allows me to travel, allows me to do new things. One of my clients is a chocolatier. Another one opens a restaurant. And some people just reach out to me to do costings. And so my life is pretty much different every day. And then if one thing I want to keep is for sure not to have a routine and keep experiencing those amazing meats and cooking, of course, always.
Chef Romain Avril, thank you very much for being on our podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure having you. Thank you for tuning into The City Show. We drop an episode every Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Spotify and YouTube. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok at The City Show Official and at The City Show, respectively, to be up to date on all of our projects. We hope that you enjoyed this journey into the heart of urban creativity and inspiration. Until next time, keep exploring your city. There's always more to discover.